Hello, my name is Artis Holcomb, and if you've ever had a sister smile in your face while stealing everything behind your back, then you might understand why I'm telling this now. My sister Venna, America's sweetheart in red heels, publicly humiliated me at a fashion event, called me a burden, a nobody. But that wasn't the worst part. She stole my design, presented it as hers, lied on camera, had me erased from the show lineup while the world applauded her. But then, something shifted. Someone saw what she didn't hide well enough. The truth. And when it surfaced, she had no words left. What happens when the one who's supposed to protect you is the one who burns you down? The rooftop shimmered with string lights, and laughter floated above the Savannah skyline. Everyone there smelled like confidence, designer cologne, dry champagne, and ambition. I stepped out of the elevator into all of it, wearing the only black cocktail dress I owned. It wasn't even mine. Celia had lent it to me with a wink and a, "Don't let her eat you alive tonight." But Venna was already feeding on applause. She stood near the marble bar in a scarlet dress so sharp it could cut through glass. Her laugh rang out every few seconds, each one louder than the last. I watched as photographers angled for her attention, as if she were the only woman in the building holding a legacy. I kept my hands wrapped around my clutch like it could protect me. Someone brushed past me and muttered, "Didn't know they let interns in tonight." I turned. It was Venna, full grin, eyes locked on mine, like she was just getting started. "Still playing dress-up, sis?" A few heads turned. I smiled tightly, said nothing. "She's always been more of a burden than a brand," she added loudly, glass raised high. The crowd chuckled, and just like that, I vanished again. It wasn't always like this. There was a time, years ago, when Venna and I used to share the same studio table. We'd sketch side by side, argue over fabric swatches, compete over who could spot trends first. But somewhere between our mother's funeral and Venna's first big contract, something shifted. Her spotlight widened. Mine evaporated. A few weeks back, she texted me casually, "Hey, can I borrow your studio key for the night? Need to grab a mannequin I left." I'd said yes without blinking. Of course I did. Sisters trust each other. I hadn't thought twice when I left the final draft of my Southern Showcase submission, half complete, ink not even dry, spread across my drafting table. I assumed, foolishly, that boundaries still existed between us. Later, I'd learn the truth. Savannah Design Council's backdoor security footage never lies. But I didn't know that yet. Not then. Tonight, all I knew was that my sister had an audience, and I had a bruised sense of worth. Venna clinked her glass, drawing the room's attention. "I'd like to say a few words," she declared, voice smooth as bourbon. "This event isn't just about fashion. It's about heritage, vision, and knowing when to let go of what no longer serves you." She turned her head, right at me. "Some people are born to shine. Others—" She tilted her glass toward the floor. "Keep the lights off." More laughter. I held my ground. My nails dug half moons into my palm. I bit the inside of my cheek so hard I tasted blood. That was always her magic trick, using charm as a scalpel. No one intervened. Not the PR rep standing nearby, not the family friend who used to bring us peach cobbler on Sundays, not even Darian, her boyfriend, maybe fiancé, who once helped me through a panic attack backstage. They all just watched. I left before dessert. Savannah's night air was humid and quiet. The historic squares looked frozen in time, each street lamp humming like it remembered better versions of me. I walked until my feet ached, then wandered back to my studio. The second I opened the door, something felt off. The desk was slightly shifted, the pen holder too far to the left. One of my fabric bins wasn't sealed properly, nothing big, nothing broken. But I noticed. Because when people overlook you long enough, you learn to memorize the tiny things no one else sees. I stood in the middle of the room, heartbeat ticking louder than the city noise outside. I scanned my work table, my pinned sketches, the scrap pile in the corner. It all looked fine, but wrong. Mom used to say, "You don't need noise to be heard. Truth has its own volume." That night, the truth said nothing, but it echoed. And in that silence, I heard something louder than applause, something breaking. Sleep never really came that night. I laid on the couch in my studio, fully dressed, shoes still on, staring at the ceiling fan as it hummed a slow rhythm. The shadows shifted with each spin, like they were trying to tell me something I hadn't yet caught. I hadn't touched my phone, hadn't touched my sketchpad. I just waited. For what? I didn't know. Maybe morning. The sun rose without ceremony, just a pale glow creeping over the windowsill. I finally sat up and checked my email. The official Southern Designers Showcase portal had updated its page. I clicked refresh once, then twice. By the third time, I realized what was missing. My name? Gone. Erased from the list like I'd never existed. I blinked at the screen, then scrolled again. Maybe it was a technical error. Maybe I was listed under the wrong category. No, it was deliberate. My phone nearly slipped out of my hands as I dialed the committee office. It rang twice before a young, overly calm voice answered. Southern Designers Showcase, this is Alana speaking. Hi, yes, this is Artis Holcomb. I was on the confirmed lineup for the showcase. I just checked the portal and my name isn't there anymore. Can you tell me what's going on? A pause. Then, there was a conflict of originality. A complaint was filed against your submission last night. Your registration's been placed on temporary suspension pending review. My chest tightened. Filed by who? I'm not authorized to disclose that. Thank you for your understanding. Click. I stared at my phone as if it might apologize. It didn't. It just sat there, cold and silent in my palm. I tried calling Celia next, my friend, my mentor, my last sliver of connection to the committee, straight to voicemail. I left a message, short and shaking. Please call me, something happened. Then I texted Darian. Do you know what Vena's doing? Did she say anything about my submission? No reply. The message stayed unread. For a while I just stood in the middle of the studio, surrounded by my own dreams. But they didn't feel like mine anymore. The room felt invaded, familiar but violated, like something had passed through and left behind an echo. Then came the knock. No, scratch that. Not a knock. A shove. Like something had been forced under the door. I turned slowly, heart already pounding. A yellow envelope. No return address. No handwriting. Just there, like a dare. I bent down, picked it up. Inside was a single sheet of printed paper and a grainy image. No signature. No explanation. Just 6 words. Walk away quietly. You won't win. And below that, a photocopy of my original design. My sketch. Only my watermark was gone. The little swirl of my initials, the date stamp, even the digital thread count overlay, erased. I read the sentence again. Walk away quietly. I crumpled the page in my hand, then forced myself to uncrumple it. I needed it. Evidence. Proof. But more than that, I needed to understand just how deep this went. I turned to my computer and opened the folder marked Showcase Final. All my original files were still there, time-stamped, layered, annotated, mine. But none of it felt safe anymore. I sat down at the desk and stared at the screen. At first, I tried to go through the motions. Open, copy, export, pretend like I had control. But the longer I stared, the more the doubt grew teeth. What if they were right? What if I had already lost? Before the first stitch was sewn, before the first sketch was inked. I could still hear Vena's voice from the night before. Some people are born to shine. Others, keep the lights off. I felt the weight of those words now like lead in my bones. And then another voice, much older, whispered from the back of my memory. When they silence you, write louder, my old mentor once told me. Don't fight for attention. Fight for your name. I breathed in, clicked save, and just as I stood to grab my notebook, I saw it again. My desk drawer, just barely cracked open. I never leave it like that. I reached for it, hesitated, then pulled it open fully. Empty. No spare sketches, no pattern templates, just the faintest scent of her perfume, Vena's, something citrusy and artificial. A sour taste filled my mouth. But it wasn't the sketch that scared me. It was how fast someone else had made it disappear. I left the drawer open that morning, staring into its hollow space longer than I probably should have. Then I locked the studio, tucked the envelope under my coat, and made my way to the convention center. The city was already humming. Traffic lights blinked lazily over Bay Street as early joggers passed with earbuds in, oblivious to the world I was stepping into. A world where someone was trying to erase me in broad daylight. I arrived 2 hours before the showcase doors opened. It wasn't for a main stage slot. Those had been stolen from me. But Celia, in her quiet way, had whispered to someone who whispered to someone else, and now I had a table at the Emerging Creators Side Gallery, a half-lit hallway near the loading dock. Glamorous? No. But it was space, and right now, space was survival. My assistant, Myra, met me near the garment check-in, her face pale. She leaned in. Artis. Someone from Vena's team was poking around here earlier. Said they were double-checking press tags, but... Her voice trailed off. I nodded, jaw tight. Did they touch anything? I don't know, but the mood changed after they left. You should check the dress. I rushed to the rack. There it was, my prototype gown. Soft dove gray silk, asymmetrical neckline, hand-beaded seams, and a tear. A long, deliberate, almost surgical slice across the back hem. Not frayed, not accidental. Sabotage. I didn't speak, just ran my hand across the damage like a mother checking for a fever. Vena didn't want to beat me. She wanted me gone. An hour later, the showcase began. From the wings, I watched as models shimmered down the catwalk in glowing gowns, brilliant layers of chiffon and contrast stitching. Voices buzzed from VIP rows, press badges flashed. My name wasn't on the schedule, but I waited, just in case someone, anyone, remembered I was here. And then, Vena took the mic. She wasn't supposed to. The MC had just announced a break before the final segment, but Vena strode on stage like she'd paid for the floor beneath her. Hi everyone, she said, perfectly poised. Before we continue, I just wanted to address something quickly. I felt the air shift. Myra gripped my wrist. Celia, across the room, straightened slightly. Vena smiled wide. There's been some unfortunate talk this week about design overlap, plagiarism, and I just want to be very clear. My work is original. It always has been. I don't need to borrow or copy to shine. She paused, letting her words land. If anyone else feels differently, well, I suggest they let the sketches speak. Laughter. Not loud, but enough. A low ripple of uncomfortable chuckles, heads turning. I stood there frozen, clutching my ruined gown, pulse pounding. She hadn't named me. She didn't have to. Everyone looked. Someone whispered, Is that the sister she's talking about? I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I held the gown tighter, and I watched her. Vena turned, satisfied, and handed the mic back. The crowd clapped, nervously, unsure if this was drama or performance art. Celia caught my eye across the ballroom. She gave the faintest nod. No words, just, I see you. That was enough. I walked out of the convention center before the final segment began. No dramatic exits, no shouting matches, just silence, the only kind I could control. 3 blocks away, I ducked into a corner cafe with a faulty Wi-Fi router and lukewarm espresso. I didn't care. I opened my laptop, connected to my cloud, and started downloading. Time-stamped sketch files, email exchanges, studio access logs, security footage thumbnails. Every thread I thought might matter. Every receipt she thought I didn't keep. And then, finally, my smile returned. Small, barely there. But it was real. Because she may have stolen my sketch, but I kept something she didn't know existed. Proof. I stayed in that cafe until the sun dipped below the rooftops, casting long gold shadows across the sidewalk. I didn't want to go home. Not because I feared what waited, but because I didn't want to face the silence in my apartment just yet. Silence wasn't safety anymore. It was reminder. Still, by 8, I found myself back at my place, flicking on lights and toeing off shoes like routine could still protect me. The air inside was warm and still. I made tea, sat, stared at my laptop. On social media, Vena was everywhere. Headlines praised her bold reinterpretation of heritage silhouettes. She posed in crimson, smug and spotless, like the drama had never happened. I typed my name into the search bar. Nothing. Not a single tag. Not a mention. I had vanished. I clicked into my cloud drive and renamed the folder with trembling fingers. Sketch backup, original proof. It was organized now, chronological, annotated, ready. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had a record. Across town in a sleek loft lined with black and white photo prints, Darian sat at his editing console, headphones around his neck. He wasn't working. He was watching footage from the show, and watching her, Venna, on stage, radiant, lying. He paused the video and looked over at her iPad, still logged into their shared cloud account. For years they'd synced everything, for convenience, she said. Curiosity made his fingers move. One swipe, then another. Photo gallery. And there it was. A high-resolution image of a sketch. My sketch. Dated, geotagged, snapped at night. In my studio. Darian leaned back. His mouth parted but no sound came. He tapped the info tab. Metadata was intact, time-stamped 2 weeks before the showcase. He stared at it like it might blink first. Then, quietly, he saved it to his desktop and deleted the sync entry. He closed her iPad without a word. I was brushing my teeth when I heard the ping. At first I ignored it. Then I saw the subject line. Anonymous submission for your protection. No sender name. A burner Gmail. I clicked. Attached was the photo. My original sketch. Metadata included. A note below. You didn't imagine it. You were right. For a second, the floor didn't feel solid. I leaned against the kitchen counter, reading that line again. Then again. My whole body stilled. Somewhere, someone had just crossed a line. But this time, it was in my favor. I didn't know for sure who sent it, but I had guesses. And more importantly, I had confirmation. By midnight, I'd forwarded the entire file to Celia's legal contact, the same woman who handled licensing deals and quiet lawsuits for elite designers. I didn't explain. Just included a message. For archive and review, please confirm receipt. Then I opened a blank document. Titled it, Exhibit A, Timeline of Misconduct. I listed dates. Venna's studio visit. The disappearance. The night she borrowed my key. The day the lineup changed. The public accusation. And now, the anonymous proof. When I finished, I closed the file and backed it up twice. No anger, no panic, just precision. This wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. She'd taken the spotlight, the applause, the stage. But I still had the truth. And if she thought I was done, she forgot I've been quiet, never blind. 2 mornings after the showcase, I was folding laundry, half-focused, absently matching socks that never seemed to have proper pairs, when my phone buzzed. I picked it up with little interest, expecting spam or another shallow attempt at PR crisis management from someone orbiting Venna's sinking career. Instead, it was from Celia. Just one line. I need you at the archive room. Bring nothing. Just come. No greeting, no emoji, no context. That was all I needed. I dropped the last sock mid-fold, grabbed my keys without even changing out of my sweats, and was out the door within seconds. My heart knew the pace before my brain caught up. The archive room was deep inside the downtown building of the Savannah Fashion Council, hidden behind a false panel door near the back of the records hallway. It wasn't labeled. Most designers didn't even know it existed. Only senior council members, people like Celia, who had been in this industry long enough to know where real secrets were kept and who they needed to be protected from. She was already there when I arrived. She didn't say hello, didn't offer a seat. She just turned slightly toward me and said, "This isn't about protecting you anymore." Her voice was firm. "It's about correcting the record." She tapped a key on the control panel, and the widescreen monitor in front of her lit up. A still frame was paused mid-motion, time-stamped, 12 days before the showcase. My stomach curled. I knew what was coming. She pressed play. The grainy footage sprang to life. A figure appeared in the dim hallway. Familiar. Too familiar. The camera angle, high and silent, caught the way she moved, confident, unhurried, like she belonged there. She didn't hesitate, didn't glance around. Venna. She was dressed in black, hair tied back in a tight bun. No bag, no assistant, just her and her phone. She walked up to the studio door, my studio door, entered with a swipe of a keycard, and paused at my work table. Then, with the ease of someone who had done this before, she raised her phone and began to snap pictures. Not just glances, not inspiration shots, zoom-ins, close-ups, angles of specific details, the grain of a hemline sketch, the inked neckline curve, my initials, my hand. She took them all. She moved across the room methodically, capturing every angle of the final draft I'd been working on for weeks. the design I hadn't even shown to Celia yet, the design that I thought was safe in the one space that belonged to me. She backed out of the room 10 minutes later, expression unreadable. The video paused again, frame perfect, on her face as she turned to look directly at the camera. Not smiling, just blank, unbothered. Celia spoke quietly, like her voice didn't want to disrupt the wait in the room. She thought no one would check the backup servers. I stood completely still, every muscle in my body locked. That's it, I thought. Then I said it out loud. That's it. Celia turned to me and nodded. It's more than enough. That same afternoon, Celia called for a closed-door session with the Council Board under Article 7, Ethics and Originality Review. It wasn't common, it wasn't encouraged, but it was allowed, when a designer's integrity was in question with direct evidence attached. There were no cameras, no press, just the board, Celia, and me. The board chair glanced at the folder Celia had submitted ahead of the meeting, lips pursed. "This is highly irregular," she said. Not accusatory, but cautious. Celia didn't flinch. "So is theft," she replied flatly. She turned the monitor to face the room and pressed play. Same footage, same silence. The room was still for a long time. Then came the small sounds. Gasps, someone whispering, "Oh my God!" Another hand slowly covering a mouth. The silence after was even heavier. Then Celia placed the printed evidence side by side. My original sketch with timestamp and metadata intact, and the version Venna submitted under her name. The resemblance wasn't vague. It was identical. The head of judging, a woman I had once interned for, who hadn't looked me in the eye since the showcase, adjusted her glasses and stared for a long time. Then she said, voice quiet but unshakable, "This isn't just misconduct. It's theft." I hadn't realized I was holding my breath until that moment. Celia turned to me. "Do you want to say anything?" I stood slowly. My hands were steady even though my pulse pounded in my ears. "I don't want revenge," I said. My voice didn't waver. "I just want the space to build without being erased." No one spoke. I looked around once, not for approval, but for confirmation. I saw heads lowered, backs straightened, notes scribbled. That was enough. I gathered the evidence, the proof of my name, my line work, my signature, and walked out of the room. No one followed. No one clapped. The only sound was my own footsteps on the polished floor and the soft click of the door behind me. I didn't see Venna there. Of course I didn't. Cowards never stay for the verdict. And she didn't need to be there. Because that moment, it wasn't about her anymore. It was about me. About reclaiming the part of myself I had been taught to shrink. About finally understanding that I didn't need applause to matter. I didn't need headlines or hashtags. I needed the truth, and I had it. And in a world obsessed with noise, I had found something better. Clarity. They say silence is weakness, that if you're not screaming, you're losing. But that day, I proved them wrong. Because the difference between silence and weakness, I just showed them all. By the time I woke the next morning, Venna had already scheduled her damage control. I saw the headline while pouring coffee. Designer Grimaldi breaks silence. Exclusive breakfast briefing. The image showed her arriving at a boutique hotel in downtown Savannah, flanked by 2 assistants and wearing beige, her version of humility. A stylist's idea of sincerity. I pulled my robe tighter, sat at the kitchen island, and turned on the local news stream. Venna stood at the podium in front of a gold-trimmed breakfast spread. Croissants, crystal pitchers of grapefruit juice. The whole thing looked staged, manufactured. Her voice trembled just enough to sound unrehearsed. "I've always celebrated creativity, including within my own family," she began. "But lately, things have been twisted. I never intended to overshadow anyone, especially my sister. I love her." That word, love, hit like static in my ears. Reporters stayed quiet at first, scribbling. Then a woman near the back raised her voice. "Miss Grimaldi, sources confirm your design's metadata match timestamps from your sister's original sketch files. Care to explain that?" Venna's face stayed still, lips slightly parted like a caught actress mid-scene. Another reporter followed up. "Is it true security footage places you at Miss Holcomb's studio late at night without her present?" Venna glanced to her assistant, then back to the room. "That footage was taken out of context. I was..." collecting something I left behind. One more voice chimed in, an older man with a local paper. Do you deny the Southern Designers Board is reviewing claims of fabrication under Article 7? She didn't answer that, because she couldn't. The clip ended, but the unraveling didn't. By lunch, the hashtag #Sketchgate had trended nationwide. The comments weren't kind. Imagine stealing from your own sister and still booking press brunches. If your talent's real, why steal? Designs fade, character lasts. Brands began pulling out fast. One by one, they posted statements on social media, some generic, others pointed. We believe in originality. Effective immediately, we are no longer affiliated with Miss Grimaldi. Our campaigns stand for integrity. We've removed all digital assets featuring Miss Grimaldi. By mid-afternoon, her photos vanished from fashion house websites. Event posters were updated. Scheduled interviews were postponed indefinitely. She wasn't canceled. She was erased. I watched it all unfold from the quiet of my living room. No cheering, just sipping cold coffee and letting the silence breathe. My phone buzzed. Celia. You didn't need to speak, the truth shouted. I replied with a single heart emoji, then opened my laptop again. This time, not for defense, for design. A new folder, a new concept, something raw, personal, called Quiet Forms. Just lines and intention, for now. That evening, an email landed in my inbox. Subject: Reallocation Southern Designer Series from campaigns@southdesiree.com. Dear Artis Holcomb, in light of confirmed authentication records, we've adjusted contributor credits across our seasonal campaign. Your original designs have been reinstated. Thank you for your patience, campaign director. Below it was a digital flyer with my sketch, my name, my watermark. I didn't cry. I didn't text anyone. I just leaned back and exhaled like I hadn't in weeks. Later that night, Venna posted something vague to her public account. When the knives come from your own blood, the cut hits marrow. The comments weren't buying it. Try blaming your own mirror. Nobody stabbed you, girl. You slipped on your own fake story. I didn't respond, never planned to, because I didn't take her down. She walked off the edge herself. A week passed. Savannah had shifted seasons behind my back. The late summer heat softened, and each morning smelled more like cedar and metal paint. I stood outside the storefront, my storefront, brushing the final coat of navy blue onto the wooden sign that would soon read, Artis Holcomb Studio. The lettering was clean, confident. I had measured it 4 times, just to be sure. A gust of wind lifted the edge of the drop cloth near the door. I reached for it, and heard a voice I hadn't planned on hearing again. You always did like your name in quiet places. I didn't turn. Not right away. I knew the sound of her voice, even without the usual layers of performance. This was Venna. No makeup, no camera flashes, no curated charm. Just her, in worn jeans and a pale cardigan that swallowed her frame. What are you doing here? I asked, still holding the paintbrush mid-air. I figured you wouldn't answer a message, so I came. I finally looked at her. Her eyes were ringed in the kind of tired that doesn't sleep off. I said nothing. I'm not here to cause anything. She shifted her weight. I don't really have anyone else to come to. I laid the brush down across the top of the paint can and wiped my fingers on a cloth. She continued before I could stop her. I lost it all. The contracts, the invites. Darian moved out 3 days ago. Said he needed space to her examine trust. She forced a bitter smile. Guess I've been inspiring a lot of soul-searching lately. I leaned against the doorway and crossed my arms. I messed up, she added, softer. Not just with you, but mostly with you. I waited. That wasn't the end of it. I got caught up. I panicked. People forget fast, Artis. If you're not loud, you disappear. Her words tasted of rehearsed regret, like something polished in a mirror before showing up at my door. Do you know how many times I've had to defend myself this week? She asked, as if I might be sympathetic. And no one listens. Not anymore. Not after that tape. That stupid tape. I raised an eyebrow. She dropped the performance. I need help, she said flatly. Money, a way back in. I know you're opening this place. Maybe there's something I could do here. Admin stuff, back office, or something. That did it. You're not serious. I am, she said, finally meeting my eyes. I'm asking. I wouldn't if I had another option. I walked over to the bench by the sidewalk and sat down slowly. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the brick. You didn't just mess up, Venna, I said, voice steady. You burned bridges while I was still standing on them. I said I'm sorry. I shook my head. No, you said you lost everything. You said you were scared of being forgotten. You said you need help. But none of that is an apology. It's a pitch. She took a step forward, defensive. You think I'm lying? I think you're desperate, I answered. And I think you're still trying to spin survival into sympathy. Her face tightened. I didn't destroy your reputation, I said, standing. You handed it over with both hands. And now you want me to fix it? You're my sister, she snapped. Exactly, I said. And you've weaponized that word so many times it's lost all meaning. A beat of silence. So that's it? She asked. You're just going to leave me out here? No, I said, picking up the paintbrush again. I'm going to finish this sign, then open my store, then live a life I built without having to step over anyone. She scoffed. Wow, look at you. I paused, then looked her in the eyes. No, I said again. Look at you. You came here thinking the same silence you mocked me for would now become your safe space. Her mouth parted, but no words came. She turned finally, took a few steps, then stopped. So this is who you are now? She muttered, almost to herself. I stared back at my sign, brushing the last corner. No, I said. This is who I always was. You just never looked long enough. She walked away slowly. No last insult, no slam of a car door, just her, shrinking with each step, until the corner swallowed her whole. And for once, I didn't ache watching her leave. A few days had passed since Venna showed up at my doorstep, stripped of makeup, and wrapped in regret that smelled more like desperation than apology. The boutique was nearly ready now, shelves lined with carefully folded fabrics, every price tag handwritten with a steady hand that no longer trembled. Light poured through the freshly cleaned windows like it had been waiting for years to land here. For once, it didn't feel like the sun was spotlighting someone else. It felt like it saw me. And then it happened. I was behind the counter, sorting inventory into neat little categories: cotton, linen, silk. My thoughts were drifting somewhere between fatigue and quiet satisfaction when my phone buzzed. I expected a delivery notification, maybe a friendly check-in from Celia or Myra. But the screen told a different story. Reddit, a design thread I sometimes browsed in the quiet hours when sleep refused to visit. The title of the top post slapped the air out of my lungs. Ask me anything, I was her assistant. Here's what really happened. I clicked before I even realized my fingers had moved. The thread unfurled like a trapdoor. The assistant, anonymous but clearly real, was answering questions with screenshots. Real ones. Dated, time-stamped, linked to names I recognized. She wasn't speculating. She was confessing. One image stopped me cold. An email instructing her to rename a sketch file before submitting it to the Southern Designers Showcase. A-Valut23.dsf became VG-Venus23.dsf. My initials erased, my watermark gone. But the lines, the folds, the shadow layering, unmistakably mine. The caption beneath the screenshot was simple. I didn't want to do it, but I was told it was part of the job. I sat down hard on the stool behind the counter. The comments beneath the post were flooding in fast. Outrage, disbelief, and something that hadn't been there before. Collective recognition. This is criminal, literal art fraud. Why does it always take an assistant to blow the whistle? Venna's empire is made of stolen thread. I didn't refresh the page. I didn't need to. The fire was already catching. I could feel the heat of it through the glass. By early afternoon, L'Ambroise, Venna's most prestigious brand collaboration, issued a statement across their social channels. We stand for innovation rooted in authenticity. Effective immediately, our collaboration with Miss Venna Grimaldi is terminated. We do not condone creative theft, regardless of personal history. More followed. Blogs, magazines, international design networks. They resurfaced the security footage. They slowed it down, zoomed in, added overlays and arrows. Venna entering my studio. Venna photographing my work. Venna uploading sketches with metadata stripped and renamed. Every frame was a nail in the coffin of her curated legacy. A lie that walked like legacy, one headline read. Another said, when ambition erases bloodlines. From the boutique window, I saw pedestrians scrolling on their phones, pausing, whispering. One woman even pointed toward my storefront, then back to her screen. Her face looked like someone who had just realized they'd been rooting for the wrong character in the story. I stepped away from the glass. I didn't need their validation. But I couldn't lie. It was a strange, steady kind of justice to witness. The world was finally catching up to a truth I'd known in silence. That night, after locking up the shop and listening to the soft hum of a tired ceiling fan, I sat in the back with my laptop open and my tea growing cold. Celia's text arrived just past 10 p.m. They want you to keynote at the new Designers Summit. No pressure, but you should think about it. I stared at it for a while. Then I opened my folder marked Rebuild. Inside were sketches, unaltered, unfiltered, just the work, clean lines, pure forms. Everything I'd once feared wasn't enough, now shining without apology. I didn't answer Celia yet. Instead, I picked up my journal, turned to a fresh page, and wrote a single line. The truth never shouts. It just waits for echoes to return. The next morning, as if the universe was doubling down, a podcast I'd followed for years uploaded a new episode. Title: Family Betrayals in Fashion, When Genius Gets Ghosted. They never said our names outright, but every syllable was laced with familiarity. The host laid it out like a cold case finally cracked open. Voiceovers from old interviews, timeline comparisons, snippets from past campaigns that now felt like red flags no one had read in time. A guest speaker summed it up best. This wasn't just about style, it was about identity, about watching someone take your blueprint and pray no one noticed. But we did. I sat in my kitchen, phone screen dim, tea now ice cold. No grin, no bitterness, just peace. A kind of stillness that felt earned. Venna hadn't returned. Not to my door, not to the feeds. She was gone from the headlines, gone from the brand websites, gone from the calendar invites she used to post screenshots of. And I realized something. She didn't need to be here, because some betrayals don't get resolved. They just get cut loose. Like old thread, snipped, dropped, walked away from. And me? I wasn't angry, not anymore, because this was never about revenge. It was about being seen. And now, I finally was. 3 weeks later, I turned the key in the door of my boutique and flipped the sign to open. The bell chimed, a soft, clear sound I had chosen myself, and within minutes, a modest line of customers formed. No influencers, no gala dresses, just a retired librarian from 2 blocks over, a high school art teacher with a curious smile, and a teenage girl who asked if the draped sleeve in the window was vintage or genius. I told her, maybe both. The first purchase was a simple linen wrap blouse, $42, paid in cash. It wasn't about the money, it was about the receipt. My name, finally printed above the barcode, not buried in the footer. Later that afternoon, while I was restocking scarves, a delivery truck pulled up. The driver dropped off a plain white envelope. No stamp, no return address, no handwriting on the front, just, to the owner, printed in stiff block letters. Inside was a single folded card. The handwriting looked rushed, not shaky, determined, familiar in a way that made my stomach pause. I lost myself chasing what was never mine. I hope someday you'll see that letting go wasn't weakness. It was the only thing I had left. No name. But I didn't need one. I tucked the card into the bottom drawer of my desk, beneath an old sketch pad and a packet of dried lavender I never used. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. Some closures don't call for emotion, they ask for stillness. That night, I stayed late at the boutique. Not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Under one of the unused bolts of fabric in the corner, I found a small, yellowed envelope. I remembered tucking it there years ago, when I moved out of the family house. The handwriting on this one was unmistakable. My mother's. Inside was a letter written in long cursive lines. Sweetheart, you don't owe the world a performance. You don't need to scream to be heard. Just make things that last, and they will. The applause fades. What's left is what you build with your hands, and your hands have always known the truth. Love, Mom. I pressed the letter flat and slid it into a small silver frame. Set it near the register where customers could see. But not too easily. It was mine before it was theirs. The next morning, as I dusted the shelves, a woman came in with a curious expression. She looked at the framed letter, then the sketches on the wall. "Is this your first store?" she asked gently. I thought for a second. "It's not the first place I've worked," I said, "but it's the first place I've been seen." She nodded, smiling. "Well, I see you." I thanked her and the moment passed, but then I glanced out the boutique window and saw her. Venna, walking on the other side of the street, hair in a simple knot, no heels, no entourage, no phone in her hand. She paused at the corner, looked across toward me, but didn't step closer. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just nodded faintly, and kept walking. I didn't move, because this wasn't her chapter anymore. This was mine. And for the first time in a long time, the silence outside matched the calm inside. No crowds, no cameras, no chaos. Just the soft thud of my heart behind my ribs, steady as the rhythm of my own name written in block letters across the glass. Artis Holcomb, Originals. Some endings don't need applause, just a locked door and a light left on. I've come to understand something I wish I'd learned sooner. Silence isn't always weakness, and raising your voice doesn't have to mean shouting. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is keep walking forward, steady, clear, and true, while the noise fades behind you. There were moments I wanted to vanish entirely, moments where I wanted to scream, to burn everything down the way she tried to burn me. But I didn't. I chose something harder. The long road, the honest one. The road that doesn't give you quick applause or instant vindication, but offers something more lasting. Peace. Not the kind that's quiet because it's afraid, but the kind that comes when you finally know who you are, and no one else gets to rewrite that. If you've ever felt small, pushed aside, overlooked, or betrayed by someone you trusted, please hear this. You are not small. Their shadow doesn't define you, and sometimes, the only reason you feel dimmed is because you've been standing too close to someone who was never meant to block your light. So, now I want to ask you something. Have you ever been betrayed by someone in your family? Or maybe you've had to walk away quietly, even when it felt like the world didn't believe you, didn't see you? I want to hear your story. Because stories like ours, they matter. Your voice matters. If anything in this video hit home for you, leave a 1 in the comments. Or tell me where you're watching from. And if it didn't quite connect, tell me that too. What would you have done in my place? This space is for real stories, real voices, and quiet truths spoken out loud. So if you want more stories like this, ones that linger after the screen fades to black, subscribe, turn on notifications, and stay with us. Thank you for listening. Stay true, stay steady, and stay standing. Hi, my name is Bridget. My sister told the world I was a failure, said I didn't belong, said I couldn't handle real life. But last week, I walked into the courtroom where she was being investigated, and the judge stopped everything, looked at me and said, "Wait, is that the governor?" They weren't expecting me to show up. They definitely weren't expecting me to hold the truth. What happens when the family that erased you suddenly needs your name to survive? What happens when silence doesn't protect them anymore? Do they apologize, or do they try to erase you all over again? You ever been the ghost at your own family table? Let me tell you what really happened. I didn't expect a warm welcome, but I didn't expect to feel invisible either. The auditorium buzzed with the kind of polished energy that comes from power dressing and name tags with gold embossing. I walked in through the side entrance, deliberately avoiding the carpeted walkway where sponsors and speakers were being announced like royalty. The State Bar Conference wasn't my kind of stage, not anymore. But it used to be. A long time ago, before everything fractured, I imagined myself standing behind a podium like the one now framed by spotlights. Instead, I found a seat near the back, behind a tall man with too much cologne and a woman typing furiously on a MacBook. My seat creaked as I settled in, the kind of sound that draws attention even when you don't want it. No one turned around. That was the thing. No one ever really saw me unless I was convenient. Then I saw her. Valletta stood off to the side of the stage, flawless in her navy suit and signature red lipstick. She looked like she belonged there. The room leaned toward her, unconsciously, like plants angling for the sun. And our mother, Mary Bell, was already in the front row, clutching a program like it was scripture. She didn't look back. When they introduced Valletta as the future of justice in Texas, the applause was immediate. Loud, proud, and entirely theirs. I didn't clap. I couldn't. As Valletta took the stage, the giant screen behind her flickered through a slideshow. Smiling families, legal outreach programs, community restoration efforts. My throat tightened. One of the photos, blurred slightly, was from the very project I'd spent 3 years building. I remembered the night that picture was taken. I remembered the rain, the woman who'd hugged me after we helped her apply for emergency housing, the smell of mildew in that tiny office we'd turned into a makeshift support center. But my name was gone. In its place, the project was credited to the Jarnell Initiative, with Valletta listed as its founding force. She spoke about resilience and sacrifice. She used my words I'd once scribbled on the back of a napkin during an overnight shift, and repackaged them in pristine legalese. I stared straight ahead, my face blank. My hand moved to my purse, pulled out my phone. I opened the calendar, found the event labeled Valletta's Panel, RSVP'd, and deleted it. No one noticed. After the session, the mingling began. I lingered near the exit, unsure if I should leave or confront. Something. Anything. Our mother caught sight of me then. For a moment, our eyes met. Then she turned to a woman in a burgundy pantsuit and said, "Both my daughters are here today. You've met Valletta, of course." She gestured toward the stage, where Valletta was now surrounded by a semicircle of admirers. "She's remarkable, isn't she?" The woman nodded, then turned to me. "And you? Are you one of the interns helping with the press kit?" I smiled, small and sharp. "No, I'm just here." Maribel didn't correct her. She didn't even blink. I stepped outside before anyone else could speak to me. The late afternoon sun had dipped behind the Capitol dome, casting long shadows across the parking lot. I walked past a banner with Valletta's face on it, smiling, promising, perfect. My heels echoed down the pavement like punctuation marks I didn't choose. As I crossed the side entrance, I caught sight of a poster, an old photo from when the Bar Association first launched its community defense program. I wasn't in the frame, but I remembered being there, just out of shot, holding a clipboard and a case file, back when I thought systems could be fixed from the inside. Funny. That dream lasted longer than most of my relationships. I paused. Not because I wanted to remember, but because forgetting felt like betrayal. Back in 4th grade, I once told my teacher during career day, "I want to change the system." Now, the system had my sister's face, my name deleted, and my work sewn into someone else's suit pocket. But I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was just ready. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun had disappeared behind the live oaks lining the curb. The house looked the same, white brick, green shutters, porch light glowing just dim enough to say, "We're home," but not bright enough to say, "You're welcome." I sat there for a moment, watching the curtains shift in the living room window. Someone had seen me pull up. No one came to open the door. I still had a spare key. It was probably a mistake they hadn't changed the locks, but mistakes were a family tradition around here. I let myself in and was met by the scent of overcooked vegetables and lemon polish. The same smell I remembered clinging to my school bag as a kid, and to my pillowcases when I'd cry into them quietly enough not to get asked why. The hallway felt smaller than I remembered. Maybe the house had shrunk, or maybe I'd grown beyond it. Laughter floated in from the dining room, forks tapping china, glasses clinking, my father's unmistakable deep voice cutting through the air like a judge clearing his throat. I stopped just shy of the doorway and took a second before stepping inside. The table was fully set, 6 seats, all occupied. I counted them twice. No empty chair waited for me, no place card. Not even a mismatched plate at the corner, like I used to get at Thanksgiving when extra guests showed up. They saw me. Of course they did. My father glanced up mid-sentence, said nothing. My mother smiled like it hurt. Valletta didn't even flinch. She continued telling some story about a district attorney she'd put in check during a panel debate last week. Everyone laughed on cue. I didn't sit. There was nowhere to. I leaned against the entryway wall, folding my arms, listening. I stayed silent long enough for them to pretend my presence wasn't a disruption. That's how we did things. Smooth denial. Ignore it long enough, and maybe it'll go away. When dessert came out, Mom reached under the table and pulled out a small gift box wrapped in striped paper. Last Christmas's leftovers. On top was a crooked tag with my name on it. She handed it to Valletta. "You didn't want it," she said without looking at me. "So I gave it to your sister." Valletta accepted the box like she was being handed a business card. No emotion, no acknowledgement. She didn't even unwrap it, just set it beside her plate and returned to her wine. I didn't ask what it was. I already knew. An old scarf I'd once said was too itchy. A scarf I'd left behind on purpose when I left the house the last time. My mother must have found it in the hall closet and decided it was unclaimed property. Something to be redistributed. I stepped outside without a word. The air had cooled down since I arrived. A breeze tugged at my sleeves as I leaned against the car and pulled out my phone. A voicemail blinked. "Drexel." I called him back. "You okay?" he asked before I could say anything. "They're still pretending I'm nobody," I replied, staring up at the porch light. A pause. Then his voice lowered. "You ready to remind them who you are?" "Not yet," I said. "I want to see how far they'll go." He didn't need further explanation. Drexel was good at knowing when I needed to talk and when I needed to wait. This was a waiting moment. I stayed outside for a while longer, the sound of dishes clinking through the open window. Someone said something about legacy. Someone else laughed. Probably Dad. He always laughed at anything that implied control. Eventually, I slipped back inside, unnoticed. I wandered down the hall, past the gallery of family photos. They had been rearranged, newer frames, bigger smiles. I paused in front of one from our childhood. Christmas morning, matching pajamas. But something was off. The cropping. I wasn't in it anymore. My edge had been cut out, the right side blurred just enough to seem intentional. I stood there, long enough for Valletta to appear beside me. "Don't linger," she muttered, half a smile curling on her face. "You always did have a thing for drama." I kept my gaze on the photo. Cropping doesn't change what was captured. She walked away. I didn't follow. I didn't sleep much that night. I wasn't restless, just clear. Clarity has a way of keeping you awake without stirring. I made tea around 2, watched the steam drift off the rim like a breath I wasn't ready to exhale, and let the silence settle around me, like a coat I no longer needed to take off in their presence. By morning, my calendar was empty except for a single generic email invite. Subject line: Charity Gala, Austin City Foundation. No greeting, no sender name, just a time, a location, and a note. See you there. I didn't RSVP. I didn't need to. When I walked into the ballroom that evening, I did it the way they always assumed I wouldn't. Quietly, without a camera crew, without a name tag, and without fanfare. The chandeliers were doing too much, dangling like overcompensation. Tables were wrapped in gold linen, the kind of showy softness that people mistake for elegance. Drexel met me by the bar. He looked sharp, crisp gray suit, and that same dry expression he wore when he knew something was about to unravel. "You're really doing this?" he asked, sipping from a glass of water like it was vodka. I nodded. "I want to see how low they think I still am." He didn't push back. It didn't take long. Valletta had already worked the room into her orbit. She stood under one of those spotlights, like they had custom-rigged it, just to land perfectly on her hair. Flawless, poised. She laughed with donors like she'd known them since birth. I stood by the far end of the room, sipping Pinot Noir I didn't even like, and watched it unfold. Then came the moment. Valletta caught sight of me. Her smile didn't falter. She lifted her glass, waved slightly to a man in a tux, and said, loud enough for the 3 reporters nearby to hear, "That's Bridget. She's helping out on the press team tonight, a real asset in logistics." A beat. Then the man turned, looked me up and down, and said, "Nice to see young blood still doing groundwork." Groundwork. The word landed like a punch in slow motion. Drexel stiffened. I didn't. I just kept sipping. Cameras flashed. Valletta had already moved on. I didn't respond. Didn't correct anyone. Didn't even blink. I simply walked toward the edge of the room where a server passed by with a tray of wine. I grabbed a second glass and moved toward the back. If they wanted to think I was the intern, let them. But interns don't usually donate 6 figures under an alias. I waited until the second round of speeches died down, then found the event director, a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a clipboard like it was her shield. I approached her without introduction. "Excuse me," I said, calm and polite. She looked up, startled. I handed her a printed receipt. "This is a record of the Foundation's largest anonymous contribution this quarter. It came from a donor listed as R. Varnes Holdings. That's me." She blinked, looked down, scanned the document. Her mouth parted, then closed. "I didn't come to be thanked," I said, "but if anyone asks what interns do here, tell them we bankroll the lights." Then I walked away. No microphone, no spotlight, just a mirror, and I'd handed it to her gently. Drexel caught up with me by the hallway near the staff entrance. "That was brutal," he whispered. "It wasn't," I said. "It was just honest. I wasn't there to humiliate her. I was there to calibrate the truth. And if it cut her in the process, well, that wasn't my hand on the blade." Later, as the event thinned out and waitstaff began clearing plates, I felt a tap on my shoulder. "Valletta." She looked calm. Too calm. "What was that?" she asked, each word pulled like thread between her teeth. "You mean the donation?" I asked, tilting my head slightly. She crossed her arms. "You trying to embarrass me?" I shook my head slowly. "You should stop assuming I'm still surviving." Her eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm observing, and you're providing content." She didn't respond. She didn't have to. That was the thing about people who live in curated stories. They never expect someone else to hold the original draft. She left without saying goodbye. I stayed a little longer, not to celebrate, not to bask, just to make sure the lights were still on. By Monday morning, the buzz from the gala had already faded into curated photos and quotes stripped of truth. The kind of posts people share not because they care, but because it makes them look like they do. I arrived at the office early. The parking lot was still half empty, just the way I liked it. Drexel wasn't in yet. I unlocked the door, flipped the lights, and dropped my bag on the corner of my desk. I had intended to review some grant proposals, maybe follow up on a housing initiative stuck in committee. But there it was, a thick, sealed manila envelope lying on my chair, like a challenge waiting to be opened. No sender, no return address, just my name printed on a white label in block letters. Bridget Varnes. I sat down slowly and peeled it open. Inside were 2 copies of a project charter, identical in structure, not in substance. The first was mine. I recognized it immediately. Dated 7 years back, the header still bore the name of the pilot I'd built. Community Legal Pathways, my proudest blueprint, handwritten notes in the margins still faintly visible after scanning. My name was there, typed clearly beneath the title. Founder, Bridget K. Varnes. The second document, same project title, same content, except the credit had been wiped and replaced. Founder, Valletta Jarnell. This version was notarized. 2 months after the original, signed off with a stamp from a notary public in Travis County. All official, all neat. Except it wasn't. I didn't flinch. I didn't rage or call anyone. I just read it twice, then set both pages side by side on the desk and stared at them like they were opposite ends of the same lie. It wasn't just theft. It was calculated repackaging, reframing history to make it more palatable under a more reputable name. The door clicked open. Drexel stepped in, holding a coffee and a bagel in one hand, phone balanced in the other. "You get here before the alarm again?" he asked, half teasing. I didn't respond right away, just slid the papers across the desk toward him. He scanned the first, then the second. His eyebrows lifted. "Well," he said, setting down his coffee, "this is sloppy. Smart, but sloppy." "You see the notary date?" I asked. "Yep. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was an overwrite." He tapped the corner of the notarized page. "Somebody wanted this buried, and somebody else wanted it to be found." I folded my arms. "Not through the courts." "No. Through you," he said. "They want you to decide what it's worth." I nodded. I didn't copy the pages, didn't digitize them. I slipped them into the drawer beside my desk and closed it slowly. Drexel didn't push. He knew the silence was strategy, not surrender. That evening, I was invited to a small policy roundtable hosted by a local reform group. I went not because I felt like networking, but because I needed to be in a room where my name hadn't been photoshopped out of the story. Valletta wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She never came to events unless there were press badges and cocktail hours. But Maribel was. She sat at the end of the room, hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing that same cream sweater she always wore when she wanted to look like the mother of the year. We made eye contact across the room, the kind that only lasts when neither party wants to start a war, but neither wants to wave the white flag either. After the panel ended and people began drifting out, I approached her quietly. She stood before I reached her. "Bridget," she said, smiling like nothing had happened. Like her last act hadn't been handing my name to someone else, like an old coat no one wanted to claim. I leaned in and asked gently, "What do you think I gave up to get out?" She blinked, caught off guard. Her face stiffened, just for a moment. Then she answered, just as softly, "Your name." I nodded. "And she's still using it." She didn't respond. She just touched her necklace, a nervous tick she always had when she wanted to look calm, but didn't feel it. I walked away without another word. On my way home, I took the long route, detouring through a neighborhood where I'd once worked on a mural project with a group of immigrant youth. I hadn't been back in years. I didn't even know if the mural still stood. But there it was, weather-worn but intact, stretching across the length of a concrete retaining wall like a statement no one had asked permission to make. Faces, words, symbols of resistance. And in the bottom right corner, just above the faded paint splatter, were the initials, BK. I pulled over, turned off the engine, rolled down the window. The wind carried faint laughter from a nearby park. Someone was playing music out of an old speaker. I sat there and looked at that mural for a long time. The first time in years my name had been attached to something that hadn't been altered, rebranded, or reclaimed by someone else. No applause, no plaque, just truth, in paint, holding up under time. And it was enough. The mural faded in my rearview mirror, but the feeling didn't. It clung to me the whole way home, something raw and grounding. I didn't need to be named in bronze. That wall, chipped and unfiltered, told the truth without needing permission. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had already dipped low, dragging a quiet over the city like a blanket settling in. I slept better than I had in weeks. 3 days later, Drexel stood in my office doorway, holding a folded printout. "It's official," he said. "Preliminary hearing, Valletta, public docket, Travis County Courthouse, Wednesday, 8:30 a.m. No press listed yet." I didn't say anything, just nodded, walked over to the calendar on my wall, and circled the date. I didn't tell him I was going. I didn't need to. He already knew. Wednesday came fast. I left before sunrise. No assistant, no security detail. I took the south entrance. No banners, no flashbulbs, no one waiting. Just me and the sound of my shoes tapping across the stone floor. The cold inside the courthouse was the kind that settled into your wrists and held on, like memory. Courtroom 3B was quiet when I arrived. It was still early. A bailiff with a clipboard looked up as I entered, but didn't stop me. I took a seat in the last row. No one recognized me yet. I didn't dress to be seen. I wore all black, no makeup, my hair pulled back simply. The kind of look that says, I'm here to listen. Nothing more. People trickled in slowly, lawyers in stiff suits, clerks carrying files too thick for a single hearing. Then Valletta entered, flanked by her defense team like armor. Her suit was perfect, her posture rehearsed. She glanced once toward the back, expression unreadable. If she saw me, she didn't show it. Colton and Maribel arrived next. My father, stiff as ever, jaw clenched like he was bracing for war. My mother, well, she wore that same look she always did when things got complicated. Tight lips, tired eyes, pearls around her neck, like they could hold her together. They didn't notice me either. Judge Audrey Jameson entered promptly at 8:30. I remembered her from a conference years ago, sharp, no patience for posturing. She took her seat, scanned the courtroom with that sweeping glance judges have when they want the room to settle. And then she paused. It wasn't dramatic, just a stillness, like a record skipping half a beat. Her gaze fixed on me. I didn't move. She leaned forward slightly, squinted, then spoke into the mic. Flat, direct. Wait, is that Bridget Varnes, the governor? Every head turned. Like a wave, like dominoes, one after another. The courtroom shifted. Colton's face twitched, anger or confusion, maybe both. Maribel's hand flew to her chest. A soft gasp escaped her lips, audible even from the back. Valletta spun around in her chair, eyes locking with mine for the first time in over a year. I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I didn't flinch. I just looked back. Even. I could feel the room recalibrating around me, people whispering, adjusting their assumptions. The bailiff near the door checked his roster, confused. Someone raised a phone. A lawyer murmured something to his paralegal. Reporters who'd just begun arriving scrambled for their notepads. But I didn't come to be interviewed. I came to witness. The hearing began like any other. Motions filed, calendar dates set. Valletta's attorney made a case for procedural delay. The prosecutor objected. The usual legal dance. I didn't need to listen. I already knew the rhythms. I had written some of them. The judge glanced at me once more during a recess, but didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. Her question had done what it needed to do. When court adjourned for a short break, I stood up quietly, before the room could try to reclaim its control. I walked down the same aisle I'd come in through, past people who suddenly couldn't make eye contact, out the same door, into the morning air. Drexel was waiting by the car, leaned against the hood like he'd been there the whole time. He didn't ask how it went, just looked at me and said, "That was surgical." I shrugged. They needed a witness. I volunteered. He smiled at that, barely. We didn't say anything else. We didn't need to. I hadn't gone there to make a scene. I hadn't gone there to humiliate anyone. I went to remind the room, and the woman sitting in the center of it, that erasure isn't permanent. You can scrub a name from a file, rewrite a credit line, crop a photo, but you can't erase presence. You can't silence history when it walks in on 2 feet and sits quietly in the back row. It wasn't revenge, it was just a mirror. After the courthouse, I went home through the back roads, windows down, no music. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel much at all. I just kept replaying the moment Judge Jameson called my name, like she was saying it for the first time in a room full of people who had tried to forget I existed. Once inside, I tossed my bag on the bench by the door and headed to my home office. The news was already on, one of those midday programs that fill time between stock updates and weather alerts. Governor Varnes makes surprise appearance at courthouse, the anchor said. linked to her sister's investigation, but no official statement has been released. Good. I didn't need to release anything. The room had spoken for me. The window above my desk was cracked open, letting in the scent of wet oak and the distant hum of lawnmowers from a neighbor's yard. I reached for my tablet, started sifting through a few briefings for next week's education committee hearing, but then my phone buzzed once. Sharp, short, unmistakable. I glanced at the screen. Colton Varnes. Text only. 3 lines. You embarrassed our name. We need to talk. Tonight. No punctuation. Just wait. I stared at it for a full 3 seconds, then hit the lock button and placed the phone screen down. Not even a question. Not even, why were you there? Just judgment, as usual. That man could squeeze an entire trial into 1 sentence and never leave room for appeal. Drexel walked in without knocking, a habit I'd stopped correcting long ago. He carried 2 coffees, one already half empty. Media's spinning, he said. A few think you're planning to run for Senate. One guy suggested it was a family intervention. I raised an eyebrow. An intervention for what? Not being erased quietly? He shrugged. Public loves mystery, keeps them entertained. I sat down in the leather chair across from him. You think I should respond? He hesitated. Would it help? I shook my head. I'll let them keep guessing. He leaned against the filing cabinet. Your dad's probably not guessing. I smiled without warmth. My father thinks my title belongs to him. I'm not sure he even knows what I actually do. That bad, huh? He still introduces me to people as our youngest, like I'm a Labrador, not a policymaker. Drexel gave a low laugh. He's watching you play chess and still thinks it's checkers. Exactly. We let the silence settle for a moment. I could hear birds outside, too loud for this time of day. I reached into the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out an old leather-bound notebook. The corners were worn, the spine cracked. I opened it slowly. Inside, on the first page, was a sentence I had written years ago. After the video, after being pushed out of the house with nothing but a duffel bag and my ID. I was the one they erased to preserve the illusion. I whispered it out loud. Not for drama, for practice. I flipped to the next page. You don't owe them the version of yourself that makes them comfortable. That one still hit. Maybe harder now. I closed the notebook and sat with it in my lap. The screen on my phone lit up again. Another message. A follow-up from my father. Come to the house. No press. Just us. There it was. The pull of blood. The assumption of ownership. I picked up the phone and opened a draft reply. I didn't embarrass your name. I just stopped hiding mine. I hovered over send. My thumb rested on it, steady. Then I deleted the message. I typed something else. Let's not pretend this is about family. It never was. Another pause. Another deletion. I set the phone down again. From the other side of the room, Drexel spoke quietly. You gonna respond? No, I said. Let them stew. Silence is louder when they know what you could have said. He nodded. That's cold. No, I replied. That's called growing up. We didn't say anything else. There wasn't anything else to say. I stood and walked to the window, watched as a young woman jogged by, earbuds in, ponytail bouncing like freedom. I wondered what she'd think if she knew someone out there still believed their daughter was a liability. Still thought the worst thing she could do was show up and be seen. Funny how people claim they want strength, until it shows up in their own bloodline. Let them sit in that. Let them hear the echo of what I didn't say. If silence is power, then my father just heard me scream. 2 days passed before Drexel said anything. He waited, like he always did, until the room was quiet, until my phone was face down, and until the air had settled between us like a contract. He stood in my office doorway that morning, with an envelope tucked under his arm, and a look I hadn't seen since the week I left home for good. I think you should sit for this, he said. I didn't. He handed me the folder anyway. Inside were 2 pages, no logo, no header, just text, clean and clinical. You're on a private surveillance list, he said, commissioned through a third-party firm that usually handles internal vetting for political candidates. I flipped the page. "It's your father," he added. Colton contracted the sweep personally. Background review, old emails, phone logs, campaign finance audits, even flagged a file from when you rented a U-Haul in Denver 5 years ago. I didn't speak. I scanned the lines like they were weather reports for a storm that had already passed. Quietly, I folded the pages in half and slid them back into the envelope. "They're scared," I finally said. Drexel nodded. "And fear gets sloppy." We didn't talk about it after that. Later that afternoon, Drexel texted from our encrypted archive system. He'd found something else, deeper, older, something the firm didn't mean to surface. It was an audio file tucked inside a cluster of corrupted voicemail data recovered from a decommissioned account Colton had once used. I walked down the hall to Drexel's side office. He was already at his desk, screen lit, earbuds in. He pulled one out and offered it to me. "It's from 11 years ago," he said. "Valletta to your father." He didn't say more. I put the bud in and hit play. Her voice was unmistakable, calm, almost sterile. "She's the one in the video," Valletta said. "If this gets out, you need to cut her loose. Permanently." There was no hesitation in her voice, no remorse, no context, just a directive. I listened once, then again. Not because I didn't believe it, but because my brain needed time to catch up with the part of me that already knew. The betrayal hadn't been a reaction, it had been a decision. Calculated, logged, spoken out loud into a phone line, and filed away like an action item on a to-do list. I didn't cry, but the air changed. Back in my office, I forwarded the file to my legal team with a simple subject line: Archive. Internal use only. Then I closed my laptop and stared at the window. Outside, the city moved like it always did. Pedestrians crossing too slowly, a siren wailing somewhere too far to help. I didn't want to destroy her, but I wasn't hiding anymore either. That night, I made one phone call to the team coordinating an upcoming town hall forum for local constituents. We'd planned to talk about zoning laws and transit budgets. I changed the topic. Family ethics in public leadership, I said. I want that title on the event page. "Should we link this to your sister's hearing?" "No," I answered. "This isn't about her." "But people will assume. They'll assume what they need to," I cut in. "I'm just giving them better things to assume." By the next morning, the forum was posted. RSVPs started flooding in. Local reporters requested press access. Political blogs speculated I was laying groundwork for a national run. They were wrong. This wasn't a campaign, it was a correction. The night before the town hall, I drove to my childhood home, not to confront, not to enter, just to leave something. I placed an envelope under the front doormat. Inside, one sheet of paper. On it, a single line. "You didn't erase me, you only postponed the truth." I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I just walked back to my car and drove away, windows down, no music. The next evening, the room was packed. More people than I expected, some old friends, some former staffers, a few new interns who hadn't known my name until last week. I stood at the podium as calmly as if I were reading a grocery list. I didn't mention Valletta. I didn't reference the file. I didn't point fingers. But I told the room what happens when families turn silence into strategy, when loyalty becomes currency, when image matters more than accountability. I spoke plainly. I didn't raise my voice. And near the end, just before the closing remarks, I saw her. Valletta, in the back row. No entourage, no blazer. Just her, in civilian clothes, arms folded across her chest. She didn't stand. She didn't speak. She didn't leave, and I didn't look away. 48 hours after the town hall, I received an email from my mother. No subject line, no message body, just a forwarded calendar invite. Dinner, just family. 7 Tuesday p.m. Sunday. I didn't accept it, didn't decline either. I simply showed up. The house hadn't changed. Same hedges, same wind chimes, Same porch light that flickered once every few seconds like a nervous habit. I parked across the street and sat for a moment, watching the shadows shift behind the curtains. Inside, the table was already set. 7 chairs this time. One of them had a folded napkin placed carefully in front of it. Mine, apparently. The room smelled like baked chicken and rosemary, an attempt at comfort dressed up as familiarity. Colton sat at the head of the table, posture like steel. Valletta was already seated, her face unreadable, hands folded tight in her lap. She didn't look up when I entered. Maribel stood near the kitchen doorway, smoothing down a wrinkle in the table runner that no one but her would ever notice. "It's time we talk about how to move forward," she said, her voice higher than usual. I nodded and took the empty seat. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. No one asked about work. No one brought up the weather. Colton cleared his throat once, then twice, like he was revving up to say something important. Then he slid a manila folder across the table. Valletta looked down. "This is a character reference," he said. "For the court. From you." I didn't touch the folder. "Valletta made mistakes," he went on, "but family fixes family. A letter from you could keep this out of the press, keep her license intact. You're the governor now. That signature means something." I stared at him for a long time. Then at Maribel. Then at Valletta. I reached for my water glass, took a sip, set it down. "Do you remember what she told you?" I asked, eyes on Colton. 11 years ago, about me, the video." Silence. "Because I do," I continued. Word for word. Maribel looked away. Valletta said nothing. The silence wasn't defensive. It was confirmation. I pushed the folder back toward the center of the table. "You didn't invite me here to talk," I said. "You invited me here to leverage me." Colton exhaled sharply. "Bridget, this doesn't have to be a war." I stood slowly, smoothed the crease in my skirt, placed my napkin beside the untouched plate. "If I weren't the governor," I asked, looking each of them in the eye, "would I even be invited tonight?" No one answered. Maribel reached for my hand, tentative, tears already gathering. I stepped back. "You didn't lose me," I told her gently. "You just built a version of this family that had no space for me." Valletta finally looked up then. Her eyes were tired, maybe afraid. I didn't wait to hear what she had to say. I walked out. That same night, I stood behind a podium beneath the rotunda of the Capitol, lights above me bright and sterile. The press was there, cameras blinking red, reporters shifting in their seats. I didn't read from notes. "I'm introducing the Kinship Disclosure Act," I said. "It requires all public officials to disclose familial ties in any ongoing legal investigation or court matter involving abuse of power or ethical misconduct." I paused. "This bill isn't about family, it's about transparency. Legacy without truth is just branding, and branding is not governance." A murmur ran through the room. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't say Valletta's name, but everyone heard it anyway. I left the podium without fielding questions. Drexel met me near the side exit. He said nothing, just held the door open. We walked in, stepped down the marble hallway. Behind me, flashbulbs burst. Ahead of me, the corridor was quiet. It wasn't vindication. It wasn't rage. It was policy. 2 weeks after the bill passed, I found myself in Denver. The official reason was a community leadership summit, but part of me knew it was more than that. The air here had always been different. Thinner, sharper, the kind that makes you remember how to breathe on your own. I walked through the lobby of the South District Community Center like I had a dozen times before. No one asked who I was. No one snapped photos. That was the gift of Denver. Anonymity without isolation. In the main hallway, a new exhibit had gone up. Youth art, according to the flyer taped to the glass. Visions from the margins. I stepped inside, mostly out of habit. But the second painting caught me. It was a canvas, medium-sized, framed but unpretentious. Bold colors, abstract shapes bleeding into one another. Grit, bloom, silence, defiance. I didn't need to read the title. I knew the piece. I had painted it during one of the hardest years of my life and left it behind when I moved, assuming it would collect dust or be tossed out. But it had survived. The placard underneath read, Title, Outgrown Artist, Unknown, Donated anonymously. And underneath that, in someone's handwriting, added later in black ink, she was never unknown to us. I stood there longer than I should have, pretending I was studying the brushwork. But really, I was letting the moment settle. Not because it was grand, because it was quiet. Because it had my name without needing to spell it. Back in Austin, a week later, I received a message from our finance officer, a monthly audit packet. I flipped through the documents absent-mindedly until one page stopped me. A closed bank account, dormant since my 20s, showed an old attempted deposit, $100. Transfer declined, date, 11 years ago, the week I left home. Sender, Maribel Varnes. I stared at the screen for a long time. It wasn't the money, it was the pause it created inside me. Not a gift, not an apology, just a single act that never landed. In my journal that night, I wrote, Some love you just enough to send it, but not enough to let it arrive. I didn't need to call her. I didn't need her to explain. But I understood something in that moment that I hadn't allowed myself to admit before. Sometimes silence isn't abandonment. Sometimes it's all someone knows how to offer. The next morning, I drove back to the house where everything had started. I didn't call ahead. I didn't plan to stay. I parked 2 blocks down and walked the rest of the way, the air warm enough to skip a coat, but cool enough to sting a little. The front yard looked the same shutters, same creak in the gate. I stood there for a moment, then pulled the sealed envelope from my bag. Inside was a signed copy of the Kinship Disclosure Act and a handwritten note. I didn't write this to punish you. I wrote it so no one else has to be erased like I was. I slid it through the front door mail slot. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't wait to see if anyone was home. I turned and walked back the way I came. That evening, I passed by the Capitol building. Reporters were gathered on the lawn, still trying to tie my name to something louder, something flashier. A man from one of the news blogs called out after me. Governor Varnes, off the record, are you satisfied with how this ended? I didn't stop. Drexel caught up with me a few steps later, hands in his pockets. You okay? He asked. I looked ahead. Nothing really ends, I said, but now it can begin without pretending. We crossed the plaza, the sounds of the city swallowing our footsteps. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang the hour. I didn't need a headline. I didn't need closure. I needed the truth to have room to breathe. They tried to end my story. I just decided I'd write the sequel myself. Hi, my name's Venna. They told everyone I didn't care about weddings, that I wasn't the type to wear dresses or fall in love. They spent my wedding fund on my twin sister's ceremony, deleted me from every family photo, and then used the venue I designed, my design, to celebrate her like I never existed. But the worst part? They didn't scream. They didn't shove me out the door. They just quietly erased me. So tell me, what do you do when the people who raised you build an entire life on top of your silence? And what happens when you stop letting them? I arrived at my parents' house at 6:42 a.m., luggage in tow, eyes burning from the sleepless red-eye out of Seattle. The sky was still gray, heavy with that stale early-morning California quiet. The front door creaked open when I twisted the knob, unlocked, as always. I stepped inside, dragging my suitcase over the warped threshold. No one came to greet me. Voices echoed from the kitchen, laughter, coffee brewing. Someone clinked a spoon against a ceramic mug. I followed the sound. My father was standing at the counter, buttering toast. He glanced up, blinked once, then mumbled, "Oh, you made it," before going back to his plate, like I was the guy from Amazon dropping off a package. In the corner, Delaney was surrounded. Her friends, our mother, even Aunt Gina from Fresno had made it early. They were fawning over swatches of napkin colors and bridesmaid dress samples. It was like walking into someone else's birthday party uninvited, even though I'd been listed on the invitation. Technically, Delaney saw me, smiled faintly. "You look tired," she said. Not welcome. Not glad you're here. Just a reminder that I didn't look fresh enough to be camera ready. I dropped my bag by the hallway table, the thud barely audible over the chorus of admiration circling my sister. I didn't speak, just nodded once and moved toward the guest room. It still smelled like cedar and dust. The rest of the day blurred into small talk and long silences. I kept my distance, doing my best not to hover near Delaney or Mom too long. Everything I said seemed to land with a thud. There was always a better story to pivot to: Delaney's spa expansion, her upcoming honeymoon, or how her fiancé treats her like royalty. After dinner, the wedding planner, a woman named Ray, who looked like she moonlighted as a talk show host, arrived with the official itinerary. Everyone huddled into the living room. I sat on the far end of the sectional, legs crossed, watching Mom flip through the papers like they were gospel. "Welcome remarks, Mr. Kane," Ray announced. "Maid of honor speech, Callie Jensen." I waited for the next line. There wasn't one. No reading, no toast, no thank you from the sister who'd once stolen my toys and my passwords, and now, apparently, my wedding fund. No role at all. "Did you need me for anything?" I asked, keeping my voice flat, neutral. "Oh," Ray said, blinking. "I was told you wouldn't be involved directly in the program." "By who?" "It's just simpler this way," Mom chimed in, smiling too tightly. "We didn't want to put pressure on you." Pressure. That word did a lot of lifting in this family. I folded my napkin with precision, corner by corner, and laid it down on the armrest. Later that night, I sat stiffly on the edge of my old twin bed. Yes, still the same bed from high school, watching the walls around me. All the old posters and trophies that once hung there had been replaced with polished frames of Delaney's high school awards. My own things? Disappeared, packed into bins and shoved into the attic, if they even still existed. The ceiling fan spun lazily above me, barely moving the heavy air. I opened my laptop, stared at the screen. My inbox was full, but I wasn't reading emails. I was looking for something else, something that hadn't yet formed a name. Downstairs, they were playing a slideshow, Delaney's childhood journey for the welcome dinner. I could hear the oohs and ahs through the vents. After a few minutes, I wandered down and stood at the edge of the living room, a photo of her blowing out candles, another with her holding a swim meet trophy, then middle school, then senior prom. I waited. Nothing. Not a single picture with both of us. None of the moments we were dressed up like matching princesses. None of the awkward dance recitals we endured side by side. Just Delaney. Just her. Shining. Alone. "Were there no pictures with both of us?" I asked, keeping my tone even. Mom didn't look up from her wine. "You always hated the camera, remember?" I did remember, but not the way she meant. I remembered getting pushed out of frame, being told, "Let your sister have this moment." That wasn't hate, that was training. I didn't argue. I stood there until the slideshow ended. No one noticed I never sat down. Back in the bedroom, I turned off the overhead light and let the laptop screen glow across my face. I scrolled through old emails from my firm, checked a few investment dashboards, barely reading. Then I opened a blank note. I typed one sentence. Not again. Then another. Not this time. I closed the lid. I didn't sleep, not really. I just lay there, eyes open, watching the ceiling twist itself into a mess of imaginary shapes. They bled into each other, lines that tried to become something but never did. My mind wouldn't settle. It buzzed with static, replaying everything, picking at memories like a scab that refuses to close. Sometime around midnight, the stillness grew too loud. I slipped out from under the covers. The guest bed creaked like it knew I didn't belong there. The room was too warm and too quiet, the air thick with old perfume and forgotten expectations. I stepped into the hallway, where that damn wall clock ticked off kilter, always just a beat behind. Even its rhythm was off in this house. I didn't know where I was going, just that I needed out. Not out of the house entirely, not yet, but away. Somewhere untouched by the chaos upstairs. Somewhere that didn't wear Delaney's fingerprints like fresh paint. I grabbed an old hoodie from the back of a chair and padded downstairs, barefoot and quiet. The garage door protested as I pushed it open, the hinges groaning like they hadn't been loved in years. A cold draft greeted me, sharp against my legs. The air out there smelled like oil, rust, and dust, forgotten summers, and half-finished projects. No candles. No eucalyptus linen spray. Just truth. It was the only space in the house that hadn't been remodeled or rebranded. No Pinterest-perfect shelves or curated photo walls. Just old boxes stacked like relics, tools rusted at the edges, and shelves littered with junk from 3 decades of, "We might need this someday." I didn't know what I was looking for. Maybe nothing. Maybe something to prove that once, just once, someone saw me. Really saw me. Not the backup daughter. Not the "you're so independent" default. Just Venna. I brushed past a pile of winter coats, ducked beneath an old tarp, and there it was. Tucked in the far corner like a secret. A faded trunk with peeling edges, and a handwritten label half faded into the cardboard. Venna. Attic? My breath caught. I pulled it out, slow and careful, the way you do when something feels sacred. A puff of dust billowed up as I wiped my sleeve across the top. The latch stuck for a second, then gave with a pop. The lid creaked open. The scent hit instantly. A mix of aged cardboard, old wood, and that familiar note of floral soap. Grandma's favorite, the kind she bought in wrapped bars from the farmer's market. It smelled like Saturdays in quiet kindness. On top, folded neatly, was a stack of old blankets. Beneath them, tucked like a treasure, was a photo album. Yellowed at the corners. Soft leather cover. I set it aside with reverence. Below it lay something wrapped in faded cotton. A bundle. Light in my hands. I unwrapped it slowly, like peeling open a memory. A doll, not plastic, not store-bought. Handmade. Every stitch was deliberate. Her yarn hair was a warm brown, and her boots were tiny felt things sewn on with care. But that wasn't what got me. It was her dress, or rather, the name embroidered across it. Venna. My name, spelled right, centered, proud. I stared at it for what felt like forever. I couldn't remember the last time I saw my name written that way on something that mattered. Not Vina, not V, not Delaney's sister, just me. And beneath the doll, another surprise. An envelope, yellowed, still sealed. My heart knew what it was before my fingers even touched it. Grandma's handwriting, clean, sharp, impossibly elegant. Even her cursive had intention. I sat down, right there on the cold concrete floor, back against the wall. My legs folded up to my chest, and I cracked the envelope open with care. The letter was short, but it stopped time. I know this family forgets you more than they should, but I never did. I saw you. I always did. This fund is for your wedding, yours alone. Promise me you'll use it for something that belongs to you. I didn't cry. The ache was too old for tears. It lived deeper than that, in places where grief dries out and becomes something more like endurance. I folded the letter back up, carefully, like it might break if I wasn't gentle. Then I held the doll tight against my chest. She was small, soft, but solid. And she had my name. A name someone thought was worth stitching in thread. Something shifted inside me. Not peace, not forgiveness, but maybe, just maybe, recognition. The feeling of being quietly affirmed, of someone having seen me when I wasn't loud enough to demand it. I stayed there a while. The garage was cold, but it didn't bother me. It was honest in a way the rest of the house wasn't. No framed lies, no polished stories. Eventually, I crept back inside. The hallway was silent. I passed the closed doors. Mom and Dad's room breathing with soft snores. Delaney's sealed tight behind the hum of a white noise machine. Theirs were the sounds of people who slept easily, unburdened. My room hadn't changed much. Just the mattress felt smaller, the walls closer in. I set the doll gently on the windowsill and wiped the dust from her face with the hem of my sleeve. The moonlight caught the silver thread in her name, made it glow like it knew how much I needed that shimmer. I slipped the letter beneath my pillow. Its weight grounded me more than any apology ever could. My eyes swept the bookshelf before I lay down. Delaney's trophies still lined hers. Cheer captain, volunteer of the year, entrepreneur feature in the local news. Mine, still empty. And that was okay. Tonight, I had something better than plaques. I had a letter, a doll, a piece of proof stitched in thread that said I was here. I mattered. I wasn't just the girl in the background of Delaney's highlight reel. They'd spent so long carving me out of the picture. But Grandma? She left something behind to make sure I never disappeared completely. Morning light crept in through the slats of the blinds, uninvited. It spread across the ceiling in thin strips, warming nothing. I blinked against it, dry-eyed and exhausted, my body still but my thoughts in constant motion. Sleep had stayed away, too smart to hang around someone like me, with a brain that never stops looping what-ifs. I lay there for a while, arms across my chest like a corpse, listening to the old house groan and creak. It had its own kind of language, this house, familiar but uninterested in comfort. A floorboard shifted, pipes hummed faintly, and from downstairs came the low murmur of conversation, the occasional clink of dishes, and the high, bright lilt of laughter. The kind you can only pull off when you're not worried who isn't laughing with you. When I finally made my way down, the kitchen was already alive. My mother was by the counter, pouring orange juice into tall glasses like we were in some magazine shoot. Delaney sat at the table, scrolling on her phone, her hair curled and face made up like every day was prom. Dad had the paper spread wide in front of him, like he was waiting for a time machine to bring back Walter Cronkite. They all looked up when I walked in. Nobody smiled. Nobody said good morning. Not even a nod. Just a flick of the eyes, and then back to whatever version of normal they were committed to upholding. I sat at the far end of the table, the chair cold even through the fabric of my sweatpants. Mom slid a mug toward me, her gesture casual, the kind of act people think covers entire years of distance. "Coffee's fresh," she offered, like she was doing me a favor. Like a warm drink fixes something as fundamental as being ignored. The conversation barely paused. They were deep in the logistics of table centerpieces and whether peonies would hold up in humid weather. I listened without listening, the mug warm against my palms. Then Mom just said it. No warning, no buffer. "We ended up using the fund Marta left. It covered the photographer and Delaney's gown," she said, flipping through a catering invoice with the disinterest of someone reading parking regulations. I went still. "The fund?" I asked, too softly. My fingers clenched around the mug. "You mean my wedding fund?" She looked up at me, blinking like I'd asked about the weather on Neptune. "Oh, honey," she said, tone sweetened by long practice. "You were always so busy with work. We figured, why let it just sit there?" No apology, no acknowledgement that it was meant for me. Just logistics, like she was explaining how she donated an extra can of soup. Dad cleared his throat without looking up. "Delaney's doing most of the planning herself. She deserves something nice." Deserves. That word hit me square in the chest, sharp as glass. I leaned back in the chair, trying to stay calm. "Why didn't anyone ask me?" Delaney looked up then. Her mascara was perfect. Her expression wasn't. "Because Mom said you wouldn't mind. You've always been more logical than romantic. Logical. That's how they've always labeled me. Efficient, low maintenance. The one who didn't ask for much because she knew not to." Mom nodded, like Delaney had proved her point. "You don't even wear dresses, Venna. You've never seemed like the wedding type." And there it was. The truth behind all the smiles and casual indifference. I wasn't the kind of woman worth planning for. I wasn't the kind they imagined walking down an aisle. Because I didn't play the part, didn't fit the frame. It didn't matter that it was never about the dress or the flowers or the cake. It was about the gesture. The fact that Grandma Marta, quiet and sharp as she was, had seen something in me. Enough to leave something behind. A small reserve of hope for a future celebration. And now it was gone. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words inside me weren't safe. I stood, walked over to the sink, and rinsed my mug with more force than necessary. Water splashed, dripped. Silence fell over the room, broken only by the sound of the faucet. "Venna," Mom said gently, "don't make this into a thing." I turned to her, my voice flat. "I'm not making it anything. You already did." And then I walked out. Upstairs, in the old guest room, I paced. I didn't know what else to do. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the doll on the windowsill, the one with the faded yellow dress and the hand-stitched name sewn across her chest. My name, the kind of gift you only get if someone really sees you. I picked up my laptop and opened the folder marked Westbridge Reports. My company's quarterly statement sat at the top, highlighted. I clicked it open. There it was. Our holdings in the luxury venue group, just acquired, were already appreciating. I switched to my email and began typing, requesting updated ownership documents. Urgent. Sent. Then I sat there, staring at the screen's black reflection. I could see my face in it. Eyes tired, mouth set hard. The same expression I wore at 8 years old, watching Delaney's birthday unfold like a parade, while I stood in the back with a plastic fork and a reused gift bag. "Let her have her moment," they said. "It's her day." It was always her day. Even now, when the one thing meant for me could have been a quiet act of respect, they turned it into another spotlight for her. But this time, I wouldn't be the one left standing in the shadows. They could keep their photo booth and their monogrammed napkins. I didn't need a gown to make a statement. I had leverage, and this time, I was going to use it. The next morning started like any other in this house. Too many voices in too tight a space. I came downstairs around 10 a.m., knowing full well no one would be waiting on me. Delaney and Mom were already at the dining table, hunched over fabric samples and catering estimates. Dad was absent, probably pretending to be busy in the garage so he wouldn't be dragged into choosing napkin colors. I moved quietly toward the coffee pot, but I didn't sit. I didn't need to. "Here," Mom said, handing Delaney a folder filled with paperwork. "These are the final walkthrough materials for the venue. Don't forget to confirm with the florist again. She's flighty." I poured my coffee slowly. The folder sat open on the table, pages spilling out slightly. One caught my eye, not because of its format, but because I recognized it. The floor plan, my floor plan. Down to the half-moon patio facing the lake, the tiered garden layout, the glass-paneled reception hall with split lighting zones. 2 years ago, I'd submitted that exact concept for an expansion proposal through Westbridge. It had been too expensive, too unrealistic, too ambitious. And now, here it was, front and center on my sister's wedding packet, with no mention of me anywhere. I stepped closer and asked carefully, "Where is the venue again?" Delaney didn't look up. "Westbridge Lakeside. Isn't it stunning?" I nodded. "Yeah, I know it well." Mom beamed like she'd just bought a house in Beverly Hills. "Your sister picked it herself. She's always had an eye for style." I stood there, coffee cooling in my hand, while a blueprint I had once been proud of was now just another backdrop for someone else's perfect day. A few hours later, I shut the guest room door and sat down at my laptop. My fingers moved quickly, pulling up Dropbox, searching archived folders, rechecking dates. The original proposal was still there. Same name, same layout, same design notes in the margins. They hadn't just taken a venue. They'd taken my work, my idea. They built their fantasy on something I created, and then tossed me out of the credits. I opened a browser tab and checked the firm's internal dashboard. Westbridge Holdings. Stakeholder status, still active. Estimated return, up 18% this quarter. Funny how things resurface when you stop letting people walk over you. I had just minimized the window when a text buzzed across the screen. A name I hadn't seen in 5 years. Thalia Brackett. Can we talk for a second? It's been years. My chest tightened, not with fear, but caution. Thalia and I had been inseparable in college, roommates, confidants, late-night Waffle House philosophers. And then, one day, she just stopped showing up. I stepped out onto the back patio, closed the sliding door behind me, and called her back. She picked up on the first ring. "Venna," she said, breathless. "Thank you for calling." I kept my tone even. "It's been a while?" "I know, I don't deserve this. She paused. "Your mom reached out to me after graduation. She said you didn't handle closeness well, that you cut people off when they got too near." I sat down on the bench, letting that land. "She told me," Thalia continued, "that you had emotional distance, that you'd never say it, but you didn't really want me around." The wind moved the patio chimes gently. I didn't speak. I let her keep going. "And I believed her. I'm sorry. I thought I was respecting your space, but now I realize I was just manipulated." There was a beat of silence, not awkward, just thick with years of absence. "I regret it, Venna. All of it." "I know," I said softly. "We didn't say goodbye. The line just went quiet." Back inside, I sat at the desk again and opened my notes app. I titled a new document, Reclamation Phase 1. Bullet by bullet, I wrote. Confirm ownership shares. Review vendor contracts. Reassign control of planning operations. Legal angle. Explore trademark on design. They'd taken what I built and turned it into another Delaney shrine. But they forgot one thing. I'm not the same little girl they used to crop out of pictures. And this time, I held the pen. They didn't just steal a venue. They revived the one place I was told I didn't belong. By the time the sun filtered through the blinds, I was already sitting at my childhood desk, still in the same t-shirt I'd worn to bed. My laptop was open, cursor blinking on the screen, the email I'd written the night before still fresh in the draft folder. I hadn't sent it yet. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to watch the world wake up, knowing I wasn't going to sleepwalk through this anymore. 10 minutes later, my inbox chimed. Subject, Revised Shareholder Distribution, for internal use only. I clicked it open, expecting a generic quarterly breakdown from Westbridge Holdings, but what I saw made my heart pause. My name, full and spelled correctly, was listed first. Equity, 38%. Highest stake, majority vote. I blinked twice, reread the numbers, and sat back. This wasn't just a symbolic investment I made years ago, back when I still believed showing up early and staying late meant someone would eventually see your worth. I didn't just have a voice in this. I had authority, real, legal, notarized power. The venue Delaney had chosen, the one they all applauded her for, wasn't hers to control. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. I closed the email, opened the stakeholder dashboard, and sat quietly for a moment. The screen glowed soft blue, peaceful and steady. Beneath it, the menu. Vendor approval, contract overview, emergency action protocol. I didn't click anything. Yet. Around noon, I changed into jeans and a dark green blouse, tied my hair back, and left the house. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I figured they wouldn't ask. The cafe was a few blocks down from the river. I picked the table farthest from the sidewalk and ordered an iced tea I had no intention of drinking. The sun was warm on my arms, but I barely felt it. My thoughts were racing faster than my pulse. Then I saw him. Rowan. He hadn't changed much. Maybe a little more sun on his skin, maybe a few more lines near his mouth. But the walk was the same, confident without arrogance. That used to be my favorite thing about him. He stopped when he reached the table, hand half raised like he wasn't sure if he was supposed to sit or just say hello and leave. "Hey," he said. "Hey." He took the chair across from me, smiled nervously. You look good. I know, I said simply, not as defiance, just fact. He laughed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. It's been 6 years. Give or take. I wanted to say something earlier, but it felt off. Too late. Too much time passed. I nodded. You're here now, so say it. He exhaled and leaned in. I had the ring, Venna, back then. I was ready. And your mom? She pulled me aside one day, said you weren't interested in marriage, that you didn't believe in love. She made it sound like it would embarrass you if I proposed. The words sat between us like static. She said you'd say no. He didn't say it cruelly, just plainly. Like he was trying to deliver a truth he didn't want to carry anymore. I didn't ask, he added. I just let it go. I stirred the ice in my glass. You believed her. He nodded once, slow. Yeah, and I shouldn't have. We sat in silence. Not comfortable, not hostile. Just real. I loved you, I said. He looked up, startled. I did. And I would have said yes. There it was. Too late and still true. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry. I'm not, I said. If that hadn't happened, I'd still be chasing after people who never asked what I wanted. Now I know exactly who they are and who I am. We didn't hug, didn't promise to meet again. We just stood and nodded. Closure doesn't always need applause. Later that night, back in the guest room, I logged in again. This time I didn't hesitate. In the corner of the screen, a button blinked. Access level upgrade. I clicked it. Admin status confirmed. Vendor override permissions granted. Contract freeze authority activated. I hovered over the event control tab. Freeze event operations, pending review. I wasn't ready to press it, but I would be. Because this wasn't Delaney's dream venue. It was mine. And I was done building castles for other people's crowns. The cursor still blinked on the screen long after I'd shut the laptop. I didn't press the button that night. I didn't need to, not yet. Just knowing I could was enough to quiet the chaos in my chest. At least until the next family meal. By late afternoon the next day, the dining table was set for 6. My mother, always a fan of overcompensating through food, had laid out a spread that could have fed 15. Chicken salad, dinner rolls, deviled eggs, even her lemon tart. The one she only made on holidays or when she needed to butter someone up. Everyone was already seated when I walked in. I didn't say anything, just pulled out the chair at the far end of the table, unfolded my napkin, and sat. The air was too sweet, the kind of cheerful that makes your skin itch. Delaney was chirping about centerpiece options, while Dad nodded like he was hearing any of it. I let them talk. When Mom stepped away to grab something from the kitchen, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I placed it gently on the table, right in front of Dad. Didn't speak, didn't make a show of it. He picked it up, opened it. His expression changed almost immediately. I watched his eyes dart from line to line, then land on the signature at the bottom. His own. It was the bank transfer authorization, the one that moved my wedding fund into a joint account Delaney used for her planning. Delaney went quiet. Mom re-entered the room, carrying a pitcher of iced tea. She caught the silence first, then the look on Dad's face. "What's going on?" she asked, setting the glass down a little too hard. I spoke calmly, like I'd been rehearsing it, just showing Dad the form he signed, the one that moved the inheritance Grandma left me into Delaney's bridal account. Mom's face didn't flinch. "You were never going to use it. That wasn't your call to make." She let out a sharp exhale, laughing like I was being ridiculous. "Venna, this again? You always find a way to twist everything back to yourself. Your sister is getting married. She needed help. You have a career. You're independent. And frankly, you've always been—" I waited. She finished it. "Jealous. It's in your nature." Dad looked down at his plate. Delaney froze. And I? I didn't blink. "Jealous," I repeated. "Of being erased from photo albums? Of being the contingency plan in every family decision? Of being useful when it's convenient and invisible the rest of the time?" Mom straightened her back, her voice firmer. "You don't understand what it means to be part of a family." "No," I said. "I understand it too well. That's the problem." The table sat in stunned silence. I stood, slow and deliberate, collected my napkin, and folded it neatly on the edge of my plate. Then, without raising my voice, I looked at my sister. "You say you didn't know, but the silence you kept, that was a choice." Delaney looked down. "Please don't ruin this for me," she whispered. I leaned forward just enough to meet her gaze. "You already did," I replied. "You just thought no one would notice." Then I walked out. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry in the hallway. I went upstairs, closed the door to the guest room, and opened my laptop again. The venue dashboard loaded instantly. My access level still said Admin. Status, Event Live. I hovered over the same button I'd seen the night before. Freeze vendor access, confirm. My hand stayed still. I wasn't ready, not because I was uncertain, but because I wanted them to think they were still in control. I wanted to watch what they built on borrowed pieces of me, knowing the foundation was mine. They thought I was bitter because I went quiet, but what they never realized is that silence has a cost, and I'd been paying the interest for years. The next morning started later than planned. I let the sun pour through the blinds until the room felt too warm to ignore. After a quick shower and a bland granola bar, I didn't finish. I grabbed my laptop, slid it into my bag, and left the Airbnb without a word to the host. I wasn't coming back after this. The venue was across town, nestled just beyond a gated community that looked like it was designed to impress in-laws. I gave my name at the front desk, and the assistant, a young woman in a headset, barely glanced up before handing me a clipboard and visitor badge. "Vendor access tour, right?" she asked. Something like that," I said, taking the badge. The venue manager was delayed, which suited me fine. I wandered through the garden hall, pretending to check lighting angles and floral setups. In reality, I was following the sound of Delaney's voice. "James surprised me with this venue," she was saying to her bridesmaids, who were huddled around her like she was royalty. "He said I deserved the best, and honestly, this place just screams us, doesn't it?" A few of them nodded enthusiastically. One of them, Callie, I think, added, "He's spoiling you. I mean, this place must have cost a fortune." Delaney beamed. "Well, that's what happens when you marry a man who gets what you're worth." She laughed. The rest followed. I didn't interrupt. Instead, I pulled out my phone, slid to record, and let the video run for 10 seconds. That was enough. I walked past them without saying a word. Delaney saw me, but her expression didn't shift. If anything, she smiled wider. Back in the car, I parked under a tree and replayed the clip. Her voice, crystal clear, her lie, loud enough to echo. This wasn't just embellishment. It was theft. Not of property, but of identity. She took everything that had my fingerprint on it and claimed it like it was a bridal accessory. Another thing handed to her because the world had always done that. Not this time. I opened the Westbridge portal, logged into my admin account, and navigated straight to the operations panel. Status: Active event. Name: Shaw Milford. Wedding date. Tomorrow I clicked into the emergency protocols and uploaded a PDF. My shareholder proof. 38%. Verified, validated. I clicked Stakeholder Action, Override Planning Access. Then came the prompt. Reason for event disruption. I typed, Stakeholder action due to breach of ethical alignment and false public representation of venue ownership. My hand hovered over the last button. Confirm? I thought about everything. About the check my parents signed without asking. About the slideshow I was never part of. About Thalia and Rowan. And about that stitched name on the doll in my suitcase. I clicked. A soft ping. Event status: Cancelled. Vendor network alerted. Contract revoked. Just like that, the machine stopped. No fireworks, no storm, just a simple line of text that closed a chapter they never let me write. By the time I returned to the Airbnb, my phone was already buzzing. I let it ring. I sat on the bed, kicked off my shoes, poured a glass of wine, and turned the volume to silent. Somewhere across town, vendors were calling in, caterers were freezing deliveries, the planner was probably having a meltdown, and Delaney was realizing the crown she thought she wore had always been borrowed. By late evening, the calls turned into texts. Lorraine first. Call me now. Then Delaney. Why would you do this? Everything's falling apart. Then, more desperately, I'm begging you. Just undo it. Please. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked onto the small balcony, glass in hand, watching Sacramento glow in the distance. Not mocking, not mourning, just still. They never imagined I'd fight back. They never thought the quiet one would hold the match. But when a castle is built on stolen bricks, it only takes one pull at the right seam for the whole thing to crack. I didn't ruin her wedding. I simply reclaimed what was mine before they dressed it in her name. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to. Something about letting go, truly letting go, keeps you upright even when the world expects you to break. By the time the sun began to stretch across the Sacramento skyline, I was dressed, bag-packed, and headed to a co-working space near Midtown. No one at the front desk paid me much attention, and that suited me just fine. The building was half full, the usual crowd of consultants and freelancers sipping oat milk lattes and staring into glowing screens. I chose a corner desk by the window, one where no one could look over my shoulder, and set up my laptop. It took less than a minute to log into the burner email account I'd set up the night before. No name, no profile image, just enough anonymity to deliver the truth without the usual performance of confrontation. Subject line, for your information only. I paused for a second, then began filling in recipients. Lorraine Kane, Delaney Shaw, Jared Milford, a handful of relatives, the wedding vendors I had contact records for, and a few carefully selected people from Delaney's work circle, the ones who mattered most to her image. Attachments? 3 files. The first, a screenshot of the official Westbridge cancellation notice, time-stamped and clearly showing my name as the majority stakeholder. The second, a scanned transfer slip, $12,000, wired 3 years ago, when Delaney's spa was circling the drain after a failed promotion campaign. My name, her account. The third, screenshots of our WhatsApp conversation from that week. Delaney, I don't know how to thank you. I won't forget this ever. Me, just get back on your feet. That's enough. It wasn't petty. It was proof. I typed my message. No theatrics. No emotional appeals. This isn't revenge. It's correction. This is to ensure that next time you tell the story, you'll remember all the parts you tried to forget. Then, without ceremony, I hit send. There was no pop-up, no, are you sure, confirmation. Just a soft whoosh. And silence. I leaned back in the chair, letting the afternoon light warm my face. Around me, people kept typing, editing, pitching. The world moved, like it always does. But for the first time in a long while, I wasn't trailing behind it. Back across town, the ripple started to spread. I wouldn't know the full extent until later, but I imagined the chain reaction like dominoes. Mom yelling at Dad, "Get her on the phone!" Delaney scrambling to call the florist, trying to uncancel what couldn't be undone. The planner crying into her iPad, the caterer putting trays of filet mignon back into the freezer. And Jared realizing the woman he was about to marry had lied to everyone, including herself. I got one reply, from my Aunt Sheila. Subject, I'm sorry. Venna, I always suspected. I never had the full picture, but I knew something wasn't right. I wish I had said something sooner. I believe you, and I'm proud of you. No fluff, no excuses. I didn't reply. Instead, I closed the browser, deleted the email account, and shut the laptop. Outside, the street buzzed with weekend energy. People walking dogs, pushing strollers, laughing like the world hadn't just shifted underneath one family's perfectly curated photo wall. I stayed at the desk another 20 minutes, watching the cursor blink on a blank document I never ended up writing in. Not everything needs to become a memoir. Some stories just need to be told once. Back at the Airbnb, I packed the last of my things. One small suitcase, one carry-on. The stitched doll went in carefully, wrapped in a sweatshirt. The letter from Grandma folded beneath it, the handwriting still crisp despite everything it had been through. I looked around the room one final time. The sheets were slightly wrinkled, the curtains still drawn. Nothing left of me here. No scent, no noise, no trace. I didn't leave a note, didn't notify anyone I was leaving. My flight back to Seattle was booked for 9:15 the next morning. I would land before noon, take the light rail home, and order the same Thai takeout I always did after a hard day. Routine has its mercy. That night, I sat by the window, sipping the last of a cheap bottle of wine, letting the quiet hold me like it never had before. I didn't need their apology. I just needed the silence to finally tell the truth out loud. A month had passed since I returned to Seattle, and the air had changed, not outside, but inside me. Everything felt quieter now, still, not stagnant, like the calm that settles after a storm no one believed would come. I'd unpacked slowly, deliberately, not just boxes, but thoughts, feelings, memories I never made space for before. My new apartment sat on the 4th floor of a walk-up in Capitol Hill. Nothing fancy. Bare floors, clean white walls, wide windows that let in more light than I knew what to do with. The kind of space you could breathe in. The kind of space where you could hang what mattered. One wall remained blank for weeks. I kept staring at it, unsure if I was saving it for something or protecting it from something. Then, one Saturday, I knew. I'd spent the morning at a local print shop, enlarging and reprinting family photos I had scanned from old albums, ones where I had been cropped out, or left out entirely. The gaps were always obvious once you knew where to look. A hand on the edge of a frame, a strand of hair that didn't match Delaney's color, a birthday party where the number on the cake told me I was there, even if the camera never caught me. When I got home, I laid each photo on the living room floor. For every missing version of me, I added something, an outline, a shadow, a caption in gold ink that read simply, "I was here." Not for their benefit, for mine. That afternoon, I hung them in a grid, 12 pieces, a timeline of deliberate remembrance. Standing back, I took it all in. Not revenge, not nostalgia, just recognition. A few days later, I received an invitation from my firm, a black tie gala at the Fairmont, honoring clients and partners who'd expanded into new markets. I'd helped 3 of them do just that in the last quarter. I stared at the envelope on the kitchen counter for a long time before opening my closet. The dress I picked wasn't expensive. It wasn't from a boutique. Just something soft and dark and well-fitting. No sequins, no slit. No need for a stylist. Years ago, I could still hear my mother scoff. "Let's not waste a stylist on you. Emily's the one who needs to shine." Back then, I thought she was right. Now? I looked in the mirror, smoothed the sleeves down my arms, and said softly, "I don't need to shine. I just need to stand." And I did. 2 days later, a voicemail landed in my inbox. My mother's voice, brittle under forced sweetness. "Hi, sweetheart. We miss you. Your father wants to talk. Your sister is, well, she's having a hard time." I didn't delete it. A few hours after that, another message arrived, this time from Delaney. "People are talking. I've lost 5 clients this week. I don't know what to say anymore. I don't know how to fix this." I opened the message, typed one sentence. Then, maybe stop painting over things that weren't yours to begin with. I hit send. No punctuation. No name. That night, I opened the drawer beside my bed and unfolded my grandmother's letter. I hadn't read the back before. The paper had been folded that way for years, probably sealed by time and forgetfulness. But there it was. A short note. Make a home of your own, even if it's made of the pieces they left behind. I placed the letter beneath the photo collage. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I poured a glass of wine, opened the balcony door, and stepped into the cool air. Seattle pulsed below, streetlights flickered, buses hummed, someone was playing jazz through a cracked window nearby. It didn't welcome me exactly, but it didn't shut me out either. It was just there. And maybe, finally, so was I. I didn't win anything. I just stopped playing their game. And maybe that's what healing really is.